working on starch cookery. So we're going to make the rice pilaf individual. How many of you made your wild rice for the group yesterday? Every group has their wild rice done. If you don't, get that going first thing, and that'll be an internal garnish into the rice pilaf. We're also going to do a little bit of simmering of some rice. That's a group function, 1 cup. And we're also doing pasta cookery, dry pasta. So I want you to make sure you only have 1 pan per group, pound of pasta, a gallon of water. So have a gallon of water, put a little salt in it, and we'll get it ready, but everybody has to individually cook their own pasta in that. So you'll need a spider to be able to take your product out, and you'll also probably need a colander to drain it in. And then each group is going to make the Portuguese sauce 1 quart per group, right? So that's what we're going to start off with today. The tomato sauce in the walk-in, we made it last week. And then everybody has to concasse their own tomatoes. So the Portuguese sauce, we're going to put in butter. And again, watch the recipe. We might not need all the butter the recipe calls for, because all we're going to do is sweat our ingredients. The Portuguese sauce comes from the mother sauce tomato. We already have that made. And so our ingredients for that will be oil or clarified butter. We're going to add our small diced minced onion, our garlic, and then we're going to add our Roma tomato. So we're going to sweat. We don't want to do any browning. Sweat these 2 ingredients. Bring out the flavor of the onion and the garlic. And then I'm going to incorporate the tomato. And the reason I'm going to incorporate the tomato before I add the sauce is tomatoes have different measures of water content in them. What most people use for a sauce are plum tomatoes. They have a less water content and aromas. Okay? So I'm just going to add these in. They're not going to have a lot of water content in them, but I want to make sure I don't get a lot of my sauce. So I'm just going to mix that around and let it steep in there, let it sweat in there for a little bit to get the water content out of them. Okay. So the water content, there's not going to be a lot in the aroma, so I just want to make sure it's gone. And then I'm just going to add my tomato sauce. Okay. Now remember, you made the tomato sauce. We married it together. Make sure you stir it before you take it out. Heavy ingredients. The food matter in it might have went just a little down to the bottom, just like roux do. Okay. Bring it up to a boil, down to a low simmer. We're not going to add the minced parsley until close to the end. And it'll probably be about a good half an hour of just simmering time. So the rice pilaf today, we have to get going on the wild rice. And I already have it done, but I need to demo in case somebody hasn't done it yet. So a wild rice, 3 to 1. And usually people cook it with water. Now some people might, as I go out to eat sometimes, I see that some people make a pilaf out of this just on its own, but I find it a little bit too overbearing. So we're just going to use this as an internal garnish. And how long did it take you to cook your wild rice yesterday? Usually 45 minutes to an hour, up to a boil and down to a simmer. If you boil it, what did you find for some of you yesterday? You used too wide of a pan for the amount we had. What happened to it yesterday? The water content went away and you had to add more liquid to it to cook it. And so what we're looking for are the grains to burst a little bit. Not all of them, because then it'd be too mushy. Them to burst a little bit, and then we'll have a nice product, okay? And that'll just be an internal garnish. So with the amount of rice pilaf we're going to use, you need this size pan today. So with the rice pilaf today, your butter, onions minced, celery minced, thyme minced. Okay, you never want to just put the whole thyme in. You want to mince it up. We have our garlic here, and then we're going to use our long grain rice. Long grain rice, 2 to 1 in our portioning, liquid to our rice, and just a minute amount of fat in the very beginning, okay? Minute amount. Because if we add too much fat in the very beginning of this rice, as it cooks, what goes away? The water content, and the only thing left is the fat. And we don't, a rice pilaf is really, really dry, light and fluffy and dry at the end. Sometimes out in the industry, people might use water instead of stock, or they might use a vegetable stock. Because the problem is sometimes when you're adding fat here, and there's still fat in a stock a lot of times, when you add like a chicken stock to that, it can become too oily at the very end as the water content goes away. So I'm going to get rid of most of this butter. And we're sweating. They brown the spaghetti. Have you ever done that? That's a nice way to add some aromatics. I'm adding the garlic and the thyme's minced. Maybe I'll mince it just a tad bit more. And we want to use fresh thyme. Don't use any dry. I'm going to add my thyme. Now this is a very classical rice pilaf. I put the onion, the celery, put the garlic in, minced up the thyme a little bit more, added that to it. Now this is very classical. I mean, there's 1,000 ingredients you can add to a pilaf. We could add dried cherries into this. We could add a lot of different things to this. But this is a method. What I want you to get mostly is everything in this class so far has been a method. You go to another class and they'll say, let's make a rice pilaf, and they're going to add other ingredients. They might make it with another grain or something like that. It's all about the method. It's always the same. Okay. So with a pilaf, using the long grain rice, we want to fold that in. We want each grain of the rice to be incorporated with the fat so that it'll stay separated. But it's pretty dry. It's pretty dry. It's not wet. We just want to incorporate it. And then we're going to add our stock. And it's 2 to 1. Now out in the industry, a lot of times, I'll rinse the rice, put it like in a soup bain-marie, have it at an angle, put it under the water, and rinse the starch off of the rice. A lot of places do that so that it's light and fluffy. Okay. But for this amount, it's kind of hard to rinse a half a cup. So I'm going to add the liquid. We're going to bring it up to a boil. So you're doing a half a cup. So how much chicken stock do you need? Huh? 1 cup, right? Bring it up to boil. We're going to put our lid on it. And a rice pilaf in the oven should be done in 20 minutes. Add a little salt. Just a pinch of salt. Stir it in. You don't want to add a lot. We just want enough to enhance. We'll adjust it at the end once we add our wild rice. Once we add our almonds to that, once we add the green onions, then we'll adjust. So while that's in the oven, I'm just going to add my almonds. And we just want these to be toasted a little bit, a little golden brown. So I'm just going to pop these in. On your steamed rice today, mostly we're just going to simmer it today. 1 cup per group. So again, in a smaller pot, 2 to 1. I'm going to put my water in. I'm going to add a little salt to it. And I'm going to add the rice, bring it to boil, down to low simmer, put a lid on it, and I'm going to keep it right on the stove. So I'm at a boil. I'm going to turn off the heat. I'm going to put my lid on it and pop it in the oven. In 20 minutes, it'll be ready. It's like clockwork. It always is. Now, what you might find is that you didn't simmer it enough or bring it up to boil, or you boiled it too long on top, or what we're notorious for is not measuring exactly. Okay? We eye it. We think we can do that. So measure it exactly so that you know, so that your rice comes out correctly. So I'm going to chiffonade. Now, in your textbook, it says chiffonade is shredding. I want to go a little bit bigger, like a 1/16 of an inch. Okay. Now, when you wash your spinach, make sure you dry it off. Okay. And this is a sign off for today, right? Because if you don't dry it off before you chiffonade it, put it in paper towels, it just gets, it's too wet. Okay? And we want it to be consistent, about a 1/16 of an inch, and that's going to be a garnish on top of our pasta. So the boiled rice, simmered rice has come up to a boil. Just going to put my foil lid on it, turn it down as low as I can. I'm probably going to take it half off the flame here. Put my lid on it. And it'll probably take about another 20 minutes for it to get hopefully light and fluffy. So my almonds lightly toasted. Take them out and let them cool. So I have my wild rice, I have my almonds, and then we're going to do a little bit of green onions as an internal garnish for the peel-off, and green onions for a little bit of the garnish on top. So with the green onions, I always look at them. A lot of times take off the outer part. It's kind of dirty, old. I usually take off the tops and usually the root, and you want to wash them. Now we're going to use the whole product today so we don't waste. A lot of chefs won't use any of the white, but we're going to use that today. And the first part, I'm just going to do a fine slice, and that'll go as an internal garnish, and then I'll do a bias cut closer to the end, or I'll use one for the small and one for the bias, making sure that probably about a 1/16 of an inch cut. Again, using your thumb and your pinky in the back to guide your product through, and then your hand that's guiding is where you get your consistency of your cut from, right? Okay. And so this is just your garnish, internal garnish for your peel-off. And then we'll do a bias cut. So pretty lengthy, pretty small. You know, probably 1/8 of an inch or even smaller. Little bias. And then we can use that as a garnish on top if you were going to use a garnish on top of a pilaf or things like that. So my water is at a rapid boil. So we're going to do 2 ounces of fettuccine. So we're just going to pop that in. I'm going to stir it around. Now if this is fresh pasta takes how long? Not very long, almost as soon as it comes up top. This will probably take anywhere between 8 to 10 minutes because it's dry pasta. Okay. And the thicker the pasta is, the longer it's going to take. These are called stacks. You can get them online. They're stackables. This is a pyramid. You can get them in cylinder. You can get them in squares. I also have this that we could, utilize today to put your rice in. You could put it in a ramekin. Okay. All I want is 1 portion on the plate. Again, I don't want a happy face on the plate. I'm just trying to get you to visualize a portion of rice on a plate, 3 to 4 ounces, things like that. Maybe 2 ounces of a vegetable on a plate. Your meat can be anywhere, depending on where you work, and anywhere from 4 to 10 ounces. When you cook the pasta and you take a bite of it and look inside, if there's still a little bit of white in there, it's not done, right? It has to be done, but it can still be al dente. We just want the semolina or the flour, depending on how you make your pasta or how they make it, to be all the way cooked. So take a bite of it, look at it, see if it's done. Okay. If it's not done, again, leave that part out and finish the rest. Okay. Now with this, when the pasta is done, if you're not going to knead it right away, then put it in a colander, and just like you would at work or home, you're going to rinse it off with cold water. And if you're not going to use it right away, then put a little bit of oil on it so they won't stick together, right? If you're going to use it right away, we're just going to make sure that it's dry, not a lot of water on it. We're going to put it in a bowl with a little bit of our oil, our olive oil blend, and toss it and season it. Because we're not putting our sauce, we're not mixing the sauce in it, we're just putting the sauce on top. So if a customer is not going to get the sauce with it, you still need the pasta to be seasoned and flavored, right? Or seasoned. Now you're going to use a spider to get your pasta out because your group is going to use the same pot. I'm just going to dump mine out in a minute and put it in the colander. Now at work, once it goes in the colander, what do you do with it for the shift for the whole night? What do you do with it? You portion it out. You always portion it out? You should, because if you don't, what'll happen? Some customer will get a little bit more, some will get a little bit less. Okay, so you always portion your pasta out. Portion it out, and then you put them in your little baggies, you have them on the line, and how do you heat them up? How do you guys heat your pasta up at work to serve it? Do you have a hot water bath? With a china cap or a... Okay. So I'm going to stir the rice up. I'm going to add a little more salt. Add a little pepper. I'm going to take a portion cup of my wild rice, a good hearty portion, and I'm going to add that as an internal garnish. I might even add a little bit more. add about that much almond. I'm going to add my green onions. Now remember, the pans are hot, right? I'm going to stir that in. And because I've added more components to it, I'm just going to taste it again before I put it on the plate. Add a little more salt. Whether you have molding implements at your work or containers. If we just have something like this at work, you could do a layer of this. You could do a layer of your wild rice. If you don't have these in the kitchen, then you can just use, we have those ramekins in there. A lot of different things you could do. Okay. I could do a little, pizzazz it up a little bit. So again, just your rice pilaf. Again, pomegranates, things like that, different kinds of seeds, different kinds of nuts. A lot of stuff can go in there. Well, I believe my pasta is ready. If you're not sure, just take a little bit of a bite of it and look on the end. If there's still white in there, it's not done. So I'm going to just take this out, put it in my colander. Because I'm going to use it right in, I'm not going to rinse it. If I have usually enough water, a pound of pasta, a gallon of water, a lot of the starch should go into the water. Now I want to make sure this is pretty dry, because when I put it on the plate, I don't want the water to dilute my sauce. A little salt, a little pepper. And I'm just going to toss it. Hot plate, hot food. Okay. Try to get a little bit of height going. A little bit of height. I'm going to taste my sauce a little bit more because, again, it's been cooking for a little bit. And it's hot. The Portuguese sauce on top. I'm going to add a little bit of my spinach. Okay. And you can also fancy your plate up. You can do some slivers from your peeler. You can have slivers on the plate. Okay. You can make them a little bit thinner, and they might roll up like chocolate rolls do if you go these a little thinner. Just so that, again, make it, nice. Bring it up. We won't check off the pasta. It's a different sign-off. We won't check off the pasta and the Portuguese sauce separate. We'll taste it on the plate together for doneness. Okay? Now today, because this is a group function, I just want you to see the rice turn out. Just put it on a plate. We don't need anything fancy. I just want you to see that it's light and fluffy. Okay? I do want you, when you bring up your rice pilaf and this dish, I want to see the bottom of it. I want to see if you burnt and just scrape the top of the rice out. So when this is a sign off, don't clean your pan. I want you to bring it up so we can see the bottom of the pan, because that'll tell me a lot.